Can you hear me?
Yay.
Yes.
There you
Yes.
go.
Recording in progress.
Okay, you're all set. Go ahead.
Thank you. Before I open up the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commissions, I would like to ask George to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Abadili?
Here.
Foster?
Here.
Gilmore present. Hearn?
Present.
Lee?
Present.
Moran?
Present.
Sampu?
Present, but with a low bandwidth.
Administrator Darcy Carley?
Present.
And Staff Member Kim Cavanaugh.
Present.
Everyone is present tonight, Mr. Chairman, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of the Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, September the 13th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. on the applications of Homeport Investment, LLC, Helen Hughes. The hearing will be held remotely as televised on Channel 18. The plans and application are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointments by sending email requests to Darcy Curley at 230 South Street, Hyannis. This meeting is being recorded and transmitted by the Information Technology Department of the Town of Barnstable on Channel 18. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make such a recording or transmissions, please let Channel 18 or I know. Hearing none. Tonight's hearing agenda is posted on the town's websites. On the agenda next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participations. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed up by the Lieutenant Governor on July 16, 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Remote public access to the hearing shall be provided in the following manner. One, the hearing will be televised via Channel 18. Second, the real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commissions utilizing the Zoom link 851-6844-5000 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. Third, the public can also email the comments to darcy.curley@town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Tonight, we don't have any RDA, but we have two NOIs. The first NOI is Homeport Investment, LLC proposed the replacement of existing failing timber bulkhead with a vinyl bulkhead at 17 Indian Trail, Austinville, as shown on the Assessors Map 070, parcel 009004. Chuck?
Good evening, Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering Consulting. Let me pull up the plan here. Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering Consulting. I'm representing Homeport Investments, LLC. I think that everyone has been to this site at least once, probably except for Hearn. George, you might be familiar, I think, a few times. We have a fairly simple project in front of you tonight. We have about 7.5 acres of land on Oyster Harbors abutting Sepuit River. The resources at the site are land under ocean, coastal beach, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Presently, the site is developed with a single-family dwelling dating back to about 1954, a guest house, a garage, workshop, as well as several outbuildings. There's also a licensed pier. And we have an existing timber bulkhead. The existing timber bulkhead is fairly deteriorated, is failing in several areas. We have washout that is observed behind the bulkhead in several areas. And the project as proposed is to replace the existing timber failing bulkhead and replace it with vinyl bulkhead. All work will be performed from the upland area using the construction access that we have shown right here. So we'll be using this kind of like road along the eastern side, construction access, stockpiling, They'll be using smaller machinery like a skid steer, probably a mini excavator. They'll be doing all that with to remove the existing timber and then putting the new vinyl in place in the same location. The existing timber bulkhead will be removed in sections and replaced prior to moving on to the next section. So there'll probably be about 10, 15, maybe 20-foot sections at a time. Some excavation will be needed to install the tiebacks and deadmen. Construction access and stockpiling will be contained in the construction access areas. And then after construction is completed, all disturbed areas will be revegetated to restore the area to pre-construction conditions. There's mostly beach grass up in here, and so they'll be replacing it with beach grass, and if something happens that they decide they want other species, we'll obviously come back for that. But I think it's a fairly straightforward project. A lot of these timber walls are getting fairly old. They use mostly 3-inch or 4-inch tongue and groove. They don't have the strongest tiebacks, although they have survived quite a long time. But we're kind of moving into the current age with some modern construction materials. And I'll show you the section. Come on.
Quick, it's coming.
I got to go slow, huh?
Yep.
I think you kind of get the idea of that here. So we have the existing timber wall replacing with vinyl. We have whales putting in a tieback on kind of the same location. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
We have received the DMF comment letter, and then there's 2 considerations that the DMF recommended. One is appropriate erosion control measures should be employed to minimize the runoff from the property into the resource area during constructions. And then the second, after the constructions and prior to vegetation planting, DMF recommending nourishing the area behind the bulkhead to fill in eroded and displaced sediment. Fill should be consistent with the DMF EP, Massachusetts DEP's beach nourishment guide. Fill material should be of appropriate slope to avoid premature loss. Question from the commissioner. Let's see who has his hand. Larry.
Thank you. Hi, Chuck. I'm looking at what's on the screen, and it shows a drawing showing it probably looks like the sheathing is the left-hand side but what I'm interested in is how deep does this bulkhead go in its present condition? I presume it's wood all the way down, and then how deep is the new sheathing going to go? And I presume it's going to be pounded in by some sort of machine. So could you clarify those 2 things so we know the potential, I don't want to call it disturbance, but the potential area that is going to be affected by this process?
Sure. So what you see there today is going to be the same height. We're not asking to change the height at all as what's going to be post-construction. So the grade, it fluctuates, but about -0.5, and then we're going to the top of the wall. So we're going to kind of follow the grade a little bit. So I gave the contractor a chance to kind of adjust how he moves along. So 3.3 to 3.7. So it's a small variable. So that's let's say a 5-foot face wall, and then we've for construction stability and long-term rigidity of the wall, we've asked for 14 long sections, so they're going to penetrate in the ground pretty far. But 2 down and 1 up is kind of the standard textbook kind of ratio for things like that. And as you guys remember, the project at the very end of Seaview Ave is going to be a very similar project to this We've actually took designed this section pretty much right off of that project. So
I'm looking at it more clearly now. It says it's going to be embedded 8 feet down,
yep.
and I wouldn't have expected you to have the top of the new wall be any higher, maybe in inches, maybe, but not otherwise. And then I suppose as you're removing, well, will the new sheathing go in first and then the old come out, or will you remove the deteriorated first and then put the new sheathing in?
We were planning on removing the existing and replacing as it goes back, so that way it goes back in the same location. So we wanted to make sure we were not expanding footprint or anything like that.
And there may be some, as you remove it, then there may be some, I don't want to call it erosion, some failing of dirt that has to be replaced eventually. Is that part of your construction protocol?
So the way I kind of pictured it was some minor digging right here so that way it didn't slosh in. Dig out a handful of sections, install a handful of sections, and then move on to the next. And then when you're far enough away and the ground is stable enough, you backfill behind the wall is kind of how I've proposed it.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I'm sure some of the other commissioners, especially George, may have some questions, but I thank you for that information.
John?
I wish we had a dock guy on the commission with us. George, looking at this, can they just remove the wood, which looks like about 4 feet into the ground roughly, and just use that same hole to bury the new wall 8 feet down? I mean, is that standard construction, George?
Yes, this is very standard construction. So what happens is they're going to go in, they're going to excavate behind the existing wall so that when they pull the existing wall out, none of that fill falls into the water column.
Yeah.
So then they'll pull it out in sections, probably 16, 20 feet at a time. They'll pull the existing wood out. They'll drive the new the vinyl in place. They'll go ahead and put the dead men in place. They'll put the tie back in place, and they'll backfill that section, and then they'll move to the next section. It's a really standard construction protocol. It's they got it down to a science now. They really do. So
I'm glad Gilmore's on the commission. Thanks, George.
All right. That's all I wanted to say. It's just a really standard procedure. I don't think it's anything we have to be worried about.
Any other question from the commissioner? None. Well, it's nice to have George to provide the insight for the construction sequence, but I think we would require a written construction protocol, from the contractor to be submitted 4 weeks before the pre-construction conference. One of the things I'm wondering is on the drawing, we typically don't asking for it, but I'm wondering whether we need to ask Chuck to show the limit of work, because the wall is about 12 feet, so your limit of work behind the existing bulkhead could be like 20 feet or so. I think that kind of showing the limit of work, and also you should show the limit of that would be the limit of the vegetation for the beach grass on the engineering rather than the detail.
Can that be done through work protocol, Tom, or does that?
Yeah, really. Isn't that a little overkill, Tom? I don't. We've never required it.
I was the one. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I was the. For me, I always seem to remember that on the wooden bulkheads, we always did show the planting of the beach grass, the width of it on the main part of the engineering plan.
Okay.
I always thought we did.
It just says repaired beach grass in disturbed areas, so I thought that might cover it, but whatever you want.
You get them to take pictures before and after.
Okay.
Yeah. 10/18, any public comment on this? (10/18) Hearing none. Could I have a motion to approve this project, subject to receipt of revised plan showing the work limit line and the planting area for the beach grass, and
So moved.
and then make the label for the existing pier with the SE3-1X60, and then provide a written construction protocol by the contractor 4 weeks prior to the construction meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck, Chuck.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. The second NOI is Helen Hughes to construct and maintain fixed piers, ramps, and floats at 94 Long Beach Road, Centerville, as shown in Assessors Maps 206, parcel 007. Dan.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dan Ojala. I'm a civil engineer and land surveyor with Down Cape Engineering in Yarmouthport, and helping the Hughes out with a modest expansion of an existing pier here on kind of a dead end of the Centerville River. I'll share my screen so we can look at the project. So here we have the locus map that's on the site plan, and you can see here this is on the very east end, kind of near the beach club or whatnot, pretty close to Craigville Beach. So it's one of the first houses on the right, and what that means is that instead of going, being in one of the more busy parts where there's an active, boat traffic and so forth, with the very dead end of this little peninsula off the main river, which the flow really goes to the north and under Craigville Beach Road and up inland there. This is just kind of a backwater, but it has been dredged, and it is, it's certainly an important for the members of the community who are up on the end here. I would share perhaps this view here, just to give you a good overview of the area. This is the lot here. This is, I believe, a 2019 aerial photograph. This is the boat here. It's a 25-foot regulator with twin 250s, pretty shallow draft, but they would just like to poke it out a little bit further, just because at low tide right now, it's really not enough water. And you can see that by the profile. Waterways has not had a chance to comment, so I suspect with your acquiescence would probably continue until after they're going to look at it, I think on the 27th. But they had a comment that, they'd like the full commission or board to look at it, just because it is a little bit of an extension into the channel. And there is, they've got some floats out here with boats on them. They move them around occasionally, but it looked to us like there's a pretty good room. And again, it's just the boat owners at the end of this channel that would be most impacted, as the main boat traffic is west of us and north of us. There are a number of regulations which we involve ourselves with, but before I get into them, just to orient on the let me see, there's an existing old 1950s licensed bulkhead here with a pier, ramp, and float that's currently licensed out to about here, and you can see there's hardly any water at mean low water. So we're just jumping it out a little bit, about 20 feet, so that we can get about 2 feet underneath the props, even at low water, which we think is more reasonable. It's not a good shellfish habitat, but still, who wants to? The muck could hurt things further up and down the river. And then on the plan view, this is a vacant lot. The Cruteau property that we're permitted recently is here. There's a little thin strip, and then there's this just big vacant site with a garage on it. And so here's the existing license number 6497 is the pier, ramp, and float. and there was an older 15. Their license for the older was 1590, so that went back to I think these were in the 40s or 30s. But there's a float that's pretty close to us on the west, but if you can see here, there's sort of a built-out bulkhead. So this is the best spot to have the pier on the site. If we were to go over here, it's lower and would have to disturb more salt marsh and would need a longer structure to reach that channel. So I think it's pretty happy where it is. But, to the extent that it's fairly close to the lot line, that is a point that needs to be considered. They would like to go with a little bit increased floats up to the 200 square foot that you guys allow. And there's two big 12-inch piles on the ends to anchor this down. The existing wood walk that crosses what we'd call a high marsh, it's right now it's fairly low to the ground and doesn't have the 3/4 inch spacing. We'd widen that up, raise it up a bit and go to the full 3/4 inch spacing on that. And then we're raising up the to a full 5 foot above the marsh that's at the toe of the wall, so we can have the passage without having to have a stairway up and down. Again, I don't think there's much in the way of traffic, foot traffic, but the rules are the rules, and so we're happy to provide that. So pretty minimal disturbance. BSC did a shellfish report. It's muck, just a couple of mussels that you'd expect in the upper marsh, but zero down there. They did find some crabs and so forth. But and I believe the shellfish had texted over late today that they didn't really have any issues or comments beyond. We're looking, we should probably address the fact that waterways and the navigable, again, it's from our floats, it's only about 350 foot to a dead end. So no one's going to come, it's a no speed zone, but no one's going to be racing through here. And there's typically not any sailboats. It's just a little too narrow up in here and a dead end. But, we'll still have 51 feet clear without the hull there between that float. And as you could see from the photograph, sometimes they tie the boat on the other side. And these floats are licensed. They do move around a little bit. We put some information at the end. But the important thing is that we feel it's at least 35 feet clear, which, that's wide enough to get quite a vessel through here. And there is a depth channel. We go up and down here occasionally just to sightsee. And there's a nice water even at low tide, so we'll make sure that there's plenty of distance there. But at 35 feet in this little backwater, we feel that that's very safe and would not be a hazard. Your Waterways Committee will opine on that when we meet them on the 27th. But we would technically need a variance from the regulation because of the existing circumstances. It's a constricted area. And that's common in Centerville River, I would add. And we're within 350 feet of the end of the navigable waterway on a dead end channel, which is perhaps best viewed from the aerial overviews. The view there, you can see this red dot here is our site, even going out 20, there's a good distance here. The deep water is generally, you can see from some other photographs and from the 2014, that generally that's on the far side of the channel. So that's plenty of room, or the deep water is all on this side of the float. The width of the waterway at mean low is about 200 feet, 20% is 40, so the variance is requested, given the beam width of the vessels is less than 200 foot with the cove at mean low water. That's your, we just had gone through, I'm sure you looked at the narrative, but we went through the 703-4 regulations, and I'm just highlighting a couple of the items that would need some relief. We'll be doing a little bit of lighting and everything meeting spec, but the regulations that I mentioned do need relief. again, it's a small cove, and I think it will be warranted, and certainly Waterways can weigh in. It's only 20 feet longer than the existing on K, than the existing. It's a low speed area, just departing and leaving. The piers existed for about 88 years at the site, 1934 original permit, and then they did extend it a bit. And so the variance is requested under L to keep the pier in the same footprint rather than centering on the site, which is the heavy vegetation and salt marsh. We'd like to take advantage of the little rock protrusion there to shorten the length of impact on the waterway. On M, it's low value shellfish, so the length conforms. On 12 inches at mean low water, we conform to that. The new owner's boat is 24 inches with the prop down, so we would now comply at mean low water on both sides of the floats, and there's no unconventional drives proposed. So I believe that you have most of the information. Again, it's a 26-foot bit. It's only a 15-foot draft with the engines up, 24 down, twin 250s. And I believe that's the highlights that I wanted to hit on this. Again, if a continuance is needed until Waterways acts, we fully understand, but did want to go over some of these items in case there was discussion prior to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Like Dan mentioned, there are three variances that he is looking for. One is the J2, and second variance is the J4, and then the L under 703-4. The natural resource has no comment on this. This is a rated 1 for the shellfish rating. And the harbor master staff has a concern about the length of the proposed dock and its potential to affect the navigations. And like Dan said, then next meeting for the harbor master to look at this is September the 27th. DMF has issued a comment letter. There's 3 comments that want to read that into the record. One is the construction plan indicating rebuilding the wooden access that overlies salt marsh and leads up to the proposed pier. This is an opportunity to raise the access to a higher elevation above the salt marsh and reduce shading impacts. Mass DMF conducted 2 field studies to assess the relationship between shading, marsh growth, and dock design. This study collectively indicating that the height to width ratio of 1.5 to 1 between the base of the horizontal stringer and the salt marsh reduced shading and marsh loss relative to the typical required 1-to-1 ratio. DMF recommend establish a minimum of 1.5 to 1 ratios across the full extent of the marsh to reduce the shading impact. Second, any activity requiring a barge should be coordinated to avoid barge grounding or operation in intertidal habitat or shallow water, less than 2 feet between the bottom skirt and the substrate over the map the shellfish habitat. Third, the construction activity, including staging of the construction material and equipment, as well as the equipment transits to and from the construction site, should avoid the intertidal habitat to the greatest extent practicable. As much work as possible should be conducted from the upland portion of the project site to minimize impacts and avoid compactions of sediment in mapping shellfish habitat. Any work in the intertidal zone should be limited to low tide, such as work is conducted in the dry. Question from the commissioner, George.
Yes, thanks, Tom. So Dan, the boat that's at the existing float right now is going to be the same boat that's proposed for the new construction. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding. I think it's a regulator, 25 foot, I believe.
Right. So that regulator right now
26.
is not subject to our regulations because of the age of the permit. To me, it seems like a win-win for us. We're pushing this out into good deep water. We're getting 2 feet of clearance under the prop, and we're able to limit the number of boats at this float. So this is going to be the only boat at the float?
They, I can certainly check with the owner and get back to you, but, other than, as far as I know, that's the only boat he wants, but before I speak for him, I ought to double check. But
Okay, the only thing else you can double check with him, I know that at one time, I think he had jet ski floats on the existing float. And I know that they're in the garage, but I know that there's none proposed and with this project, correct?
Yeah, it would be, if we did, we'd have to come back and modify and have it be part of the 200, right?
Right.
So not at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. And so I look at this as kind of a win-win, because we're getting this boat out to where it should be for the water depth. I think waterways won't have a problem with this personally, but we'll see. But I think it's a good project, so I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Louise?
Thank you. George alluded to it, but I just want to make sure. These changes are substantial changes. Therefore, this dock is brought into our regulations, correct?
Yes,
I think it would be read that way, yeah. That's, unless somebody opines otherwise, it seemed to me that a 20-foot extension on a short pier would be substantial.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that that's the case, unless I hear otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And we're asking to modify, just those, or get the variances just as requested in the narrative and as Chairman Lee enumerated.
Yes, this would be a substantial change. That's why this will be brought under the 703. And with the shellfish rating, for this shellfish rating of 1, this would be a 12-inch rule. Larry?
Thank you. Dan, you made mention somewhat casually that there was dredging in that part of the Centerville River, and I reread your very, very well presented attempt to cover all the performance standards. And I didn't see anything about dredging. Can you clarify that a little bit more, and perhaps, if possible, add something on the plan to cover that?
Well, to be clear, I was just noting that it had been dredged in the past, and you can see just by this aerial, it's plain. Nature doesn't do perfectly straight rectangular channels. It does meandering channels. So you can just tell that it had been dredged in the past. There's no markings for the channel, but on a low tide view like this 2014, you can see the color variation, and there's perfectly straight dredge line there. So that was my only comment on that. I can certainly do some investigation and see if I could find something. I seem to remember a long time ago we did have some, channel mapping, but it's probably no more accurate than the soundings, which show, precisely where it was deepened a little bit.
Well, I would recommend, excuse me, I'd recommend, subject to the harbor master as well as other commissioners, that once you determine where the new float's going to be, just have depth indication shown on that. I think that to me would be sufficient, rather than try to resurrect the whole dredging project and its history. I think as long as we know that there's an improvement in depth, that would support George's anticipation as well. That's what I recommend. But
before I go to Bill and Dan, normally in our pier permitting, we kind of showing the water depths, different water depths near the floats, so that when you put on your boats, we know exactly how deep is the water on that. So that's something that you should look at and to provide if possible.
Yeah,
Bill?
I've got, just to cover that, I've got 3.1 annotated here and 3.9 annotated there. If you would like to add spot grades, we could do that, but you see it's about a 2 foot on the minus low, so 5 to 6 would be, that's beneath 1.9. Comes out with a 3.1 and the 3.9, about a foot difference between from one side of the float to the other.
Usually we require some water depth surrounding the float, so we know exactly what it is, because right now when we look at it, when I look at that, I have to try to interpret the data from the contour and come up with something in terms of the water depths.
Yeah.
If you had some spots, Dan, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we'd be glad to add a couple there. Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah, what's the length of the existing pier?
So the end of the float, it looks like around 20 feet. I could investigate that a little bit more carefully. The license has from the face of the bulkhead has 19 is licensed. And
That's about a doubling. You're roughly doubling the size of this length of it, right?
Yeah, it's what's permitted now. Well, you can't really see that, but it just goes out from the top of the bulkhead and spans out with a long plank to a float. We're gonna extend that out over the water, and the length overall from the end of the float to the end of the float is going out 20 feet. So roughly doubled seaward of mean high water. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Just looking at the aerials, it reminds me of Florida or something. It is such a developed area, and yet I'm not like feeling as though biological resources per se are probably being impacted by this. But I'm thinking, what development? And so I guess my personal feeling is I'm very interested and would be much persuaded by the Waterways Committee's decision in terms of where I'm at. I mean, it just looks very busy. And yet, if people are okay and everyone thinks this is a place we can all navigate through, so be it. But I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Very understandable. Yeah, the whole key is to get the boat out where the water's deep enough so we're not constantly stirring up the muck. And you can see the crew tows here have a much longer pier to get that. Here, these really should be a little bit longer.
Yeah, George makes a good point. I mean, relative to what you just said, getting away from the shore. But boy, navigating is going to be kind of interesting.
Yeah, but look at bird's eye view. You can see the boats. They're pretty mobile items, and they can turn on a dime.
Okay.
With the twins, and
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Peter?
So Dan, just confirm that the residence that is applying for this extension is right across the Long Beach Road?
Yeah, so it's one of these grandfathered situations, which I don't know if that's relief or not, or what it is, but according to the owner, his father sold the one across the street a while back, but has retained this one with the garage for 30 whatever years. So no, it's just for whatever reason, it's just its own little island. It's got a little garage and it's a pretty good sized lot, but it doesn't have a sister across the way.
Okay, so it actually does not have a residence associated with it.
No, well, not right across the street anyway. They probably have a
not a adjoining residence.
Not directly abutting across the street. No.
Okay, or any residence along Long Beach Road.
Not to the best of my knowledge, no, but I could certainly check.
Okay. Well, George, I agree with George's interpretation, a little bit deeper water. I think we are at times hesitant about docks not associated with an actual residence that is right there, but I'll hear what my other commissioners have to say about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. John?
Thank you, Tom. A couple of things. Then, Dan, you keep saying this minor extension, but it's not. It's doubling the size of the dock. So I would take issue with your description of minor extension. Secondly, I look at it, it's a 26-foot boat. It would have to be spec'd, and no other boat would be allowed on there without prior commission approval, including and especially personal watercraft. But with a 26-foot boat, do you need 33 feet of float?
Do you need, that's
a lot of float with a 26-foot boat with, by the way, 500 horsepower engines on it. That's a lot of power. Go ahead. Do you need it for a 26-foot boat? Why 33 feet of float?
Well, that was requested of the applicant. The applicant, it certainly makes it easier to load, both ends of the boat, and to tie it up during a blow is a lot safer. You can run the lines, in a nice, safe manner. The piles have a lot of leverage because they're far apart, and a lot of strength is imparted on the overall design because of that. But I think really they probably just landed on it because that's your maximum, and a lot of people are granted that. There's very little, there's muck there, so there's no shellfish. The shading shouldn't be too big a concern. It's deeper water. And when I say minor, we're used to piers 80, 90 feet long, and this is only going out another 20. So, but I would agree that from a regulatory perspective, it's probably not minor. But
okay, yeah, and you're looking at the request for variances. 3 variances required under the regulation for this. The other issue I looked at, it's interesting. If you go back to the aerial that you showed us, I'd love to see what it would look like if you put the boat on where the float is. You put a boat on the inside, and then you added your boat to the end of your floats. My estimates would be something like 30 to 35 feet separation. In other words, if you take your dock and you extend it to 20 feet and then added the floats there and then put a boat on it, and then that float in the middle, if you put a boat on the inside, just the deeper water, it'd be interesting to see what that distance is, Dan. I wonder if you could do that when you come back.
100% yes, and our estimate was roughly 35 clear, even with a beamy boat on there. But we can certainly overlay that, and that'll be instructive to look at.
And then the other issue, and again, I sort of agree with Bill on this one. I'm very interested. George used a point relative to the impact on the bottom, and I can agree with that. But I get concerned with the navigation issues as I see in there. I know people do sail in there, et cetera. So it'd be kind of interesting to see what the Waterways Committee thinks about this thing. Harbor Master expressed concerns about navigation, so we really do need to see that. But if you can get back and take a look at that aerial, except with the modifications, I think that would be very helpful to me. I agree with Tom, by the way. You should have the water depths indicated on there. That would also help. And some clear understanding of the fact that this is the boat that's going to be on there, and no other boats are allowed without coming back to the commission. The existence of those personal watercrafts, as any boater probably knows, they can be pretty tough on the bottom, even in 1.9 feet of water, because of the way they're propelled. So I just want to be sure that we're facing that issue. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and I will check in with the owner on personal watercraft. They had escaped my view. I didn't look in the garage, I guess, but I'll ask about it, and if we have to modify the proposal and re-advertise or whatnot, we'll certainly do that.
I'm sorry, and one more comment. Peter brought up something, and I didn't realize it. Well done, Peter. The fact that this is not attached to a residence, which I think the regulations generally require. In fact, we usually say you can't get a dock until you've got a occupancy permit. But this doesn't have a residence. But on the other hand, Pete, this one is kind of a grandfathered situation. So if it was a new request, that would be a real concern for me. But I'm really glad you brought the issue up, Pete.
Thanks, John. George?
Yeah, I agree, Pete, with your comments. But again, this is an existing pier, so I don't think that plays into it. I just look at it and I say, man, do we want a 26-foot regulator tied up to that existing float with 2, whatever they are, outboards, big outboards, in a 1.5 foot of water at low tide? Doesn't make any sense to me. Right. So I look at it as a big plus. There are 6 boats above this dock in the river. They're all outboards. And I disagree, John. There's no sailing up here because nobody wants to sail up at the end of this river. You get very little wind because you're up at this headland.
Yes.
And it's,
But I have seen up there, George, is those little day kids.
yeah, you might see something like that.
Sailboards, whatever they call them.
Yeah, but there's really literally anybody that sails up there is crazy. But anyhow, like I said, 6 boats up there beyond this. Again, I agree. Let's see what Waterway says. I know I used to take my 30 by 60 foot barge up there. And I was just telling Darcy a while ago, but last time I was up there, and I was almost right near where this site is. And I had a bottlenose dolphin swimming around me for about a week up there. So it was pretty amazing, but I was afraid it was caught up there, but it did find its way out. But anyway, I look at it as a real positive. I don't know why we're even getting all upset about it, but anyway.
And I would say,
I think it's a big plus.
I appreciate the comments, George. If you guys are really insisting we put a house on this lot, we'll carefully consider it.
The owner might have a problem with that, Dan.
I'd be delighted.
Frankly, I'm not sure the owner would, but I just soon see it remain the way it is myself.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll take the grandfathering. Thank you.
One quick question, Darcy. All these photographs, do you need a copy?
I did send the commissioners and a note to Kim of the ones that Dan sent an email in last minute before the hearing. So I don't know if this is one of the aerials that's in that.
Yes.
It is?
There
Okay.
was only 2. It's this one and the 2014. There was a grainier image of the 2014 in the NOI package, but I sent a crisper copy and this photo. So you have both.
Okay. And Tom, when you have a chance, I have a couple of comments too.
Go ahead.
Or question. Okay. Yeah. So, you might want to consider if you're going to do a finding for the J2, J4, and L that maybe you at least do bring up A, which is, not having a residence there. You might want to have that in the finding just so it's
Agreed.
mentioned.
Agreed.
And I agree with John. I remember when we were going over the one for 49 Main Street, we do always ask to have the ghost footprint of the vessel on the engineering plan with the distance to whatever the issue is. So I would say put the regulator on the outside and run the distance to the float. And if you need to come back to try to seek approval for a second vessel, then that would have to be a revised plan where you add the ghost footprint of the vessel on the float. That's my recommendation. And I noticed on number 6, and you mentioned, Dan, about lighting, that would have to come back. I'm not sure I like number 6 notation where it says lights will match what the regulations are. We always say that needs to come back as a revised plan. I don't see that you are showing the lights and all the information about what the regulation is. Are there lights on the plan?
We asked the owner whether he would like some lights, and he said that he would. And so we I believe noted that it would do the minimum wattage and spacing. There's water and electricity shown on the cross section. I don't know that I detailed exactly where, but we could certainly put a couple of lights on the plan to show that they meet code.
Okay, so the commissioners, you should add that to the motion if you're going to approve lights, but then that has to be on the revised plan showing where they are. You do prefer to have that, and they'll be switched off from the house, the whole spiel, but that has to be on the plan.
Since there's no house to switch it off.
I'm sorry, yeah, there's a garage. But
if that works, if it's sideways of the regulation, we can certainly talk about it. But I'll make those revisions to the plan. And we had noted in our under J2 we felt that there was going to be about a 35 foot way, just as John had intimated. So we'll get that on the plan as well.
Thank you. Those are my questions and comments.
Any other question from the commissioner? None. Channel 18, any public comment? I see Carol's hands up.
Hello, this is Paul Cushing and Carol Ann Cushing from the adjacent property, 98 Long Beach Road, where you see the small float to the left of the subject property. I have two questions. I think you indicated that the pier would be raised, the wall would be raised underneath it. And I'm wondering over what span would the wall be raised, the entire wall or just under the ramp? And the second question is you indicated that the ramp would be moved to the center, one direction or the other. Could you clarify whether that would be moving closer to our property or away from our property? Thank you.
Sure. So I'm not sure that I'm entirely understanding you, but the rock wall, which is like the substrate in the high marsh, is not going to move. But what we would do is raise the decking up above that, just a little bit higher. You can see basically where the old one is here to the new one's probably about 1.5 to 2 foot higher to get the proper 5 foot of clearance under it. So with respect to yours, it's no closer. I would say here's the ghost of the old outline here and the new one here. So you can say it just goes straight and then the floats go to the east away from your property. This is the Cushing property here. So we're moving to, we're going to be 37 off of the extension of the lot line. So basically no closer, and it's moving east a little bit. The regulations do, suggest being closer to the center of the lot. So that's why we shifted it. So that would be, I believe, a good answer for your question. But again, we're just raising the walkway up a little higher. The wall is staying where it is.
So the project doesn't involve any repair to the wall?
No. We'd have to come back if there is any failure of that rock wall. It is a licensed structure. Again, the license number I quoted earlier, it's 1590, and they would have to come back for that under a separate order.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Channel 18.
I'm just going to check in quickly with Sharon or Maureen if they have any comments.
No comments, thank you. This is Sharon Monahan.
Okay, and Maureen?
No, thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Then the waterway is meeting on the 27th. So the next available date would be October the 11th. Is that okay?
Yeah, that should be okay. If we have trouble, we could just ask for another extension. So I'd appreciate if we get on that meeting. Thank you.
I have a motion to continue this applications to October the 11th.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampo,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That is unanimous.
I appreciate your careful consideration. I will see you on the 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two EC certificate of compliance. Brian Conley, SE3-5272, Ron and Sheila Perry, SE3-5656. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampo,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. On the last item on tonight is our new business. We have about a 10% design plan on the Scudder Lane boat ramp improvement. So I have invited Paul Graves from the DPW come and discuss this with us in terms of the preliminary plan 10%. I also invited Amy Coder from the Natural Resource to be part of these discussions. I always go there during the oyster season, same thing as peak. So we have seen a lot of traffic in that area, especially when we have the scuttling projects that has some construction on the edge of the boat ramp and stuff like that. So this is a good chance to repair that boat ramp edge and some problem with the boat ramp. So with that, I just want to give Paul to give a brief introduction on the project and whatever that stuff that he wants to discuss. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Paul Graves. I'm a project manager with the Town of Barnstable Department of Public Works. And as noted, I'm here to discuss improvements to the Scudder's Lane boat ramp. Those of you familiar with it, Tom certainly sounds like he is. You know that it's severely deteriorated and obviously needs to be reconstructed. We participated in an initial public meeting with some stakeholders at Town Hall half a year to a year ago, and one of the prevailing comments was that, of course, they want the boat ramp replaced, but they would like the minimum amount of changes apart from that. Now, the plans that I submitted are very, very preliminary draft, early conceptual plans, and they're not really as presentation worthy as I would like right now. We're preparing for a formal public meeting, hopefully this fall, to present some ideas and receive public comments. And part of those public comments that we'd be seeking to receive are, or most of the comments that we need input on are what the scope of the project should be. So obviously the minimum scope needs to include replacing the boat ramp, but I think there's a few other things that would be in that minimum scope, and that would include reconstructing the revetment and guardrail, which is in a state of collapse. I think that we will trigger the requirement to create an ADA accessible parking space there. And we know that part of the problem there is that there's a very steep hill on Scudder's Lane heading down to the boat ramp. We need to do some work to improve how we collect drainage so that it's not as erosive there. Now, the plans that I distributed show a number of other possible improvements. The plans don't do a good enough job of identifying what we think are the minimum or base scope and what are some potential add-ons. But those potential add-ons would include, and again, only if there's stakeholder consensus that any of this is warranted, and only if it can be permitted. We haven't made any determinations yet, but we looked at, and you'll see on those plans, whether a wider boat ramp would be feasible. It appears feasible. We're not sure it's necessary or desired. Whether there should be a truck with trailer turnaround capability above the boat ramp. That would probably require us to block off the parking where people currently park, though. And there's also an option for several truck with trailer parking spaces along the sides of the parking lot of both the boat ramp. We've heard that and observed, of course, that at times of year, it's very, very busy there. So we looked at the feasibility of improving on-street parking on Scudder's Lane. One concept for that would include some widening. So the current pavement width is about 20 feet on Scudder's Lane. If we widened it to closer to 30 feet, there would be safer, more usable, and possibly some additional parking spaces there. Again, we don't know if anyone wants that. And another possible scope item might be solar LED lighting. We don't know if it's needed or wanted. We've had early communications or discussions with Marine and Environmental Affairs about the project, and at this point, we are our consultant is preparing plans that will be used in a presentation at a public meeting that we hope gets scheduled this fall. These plans that I've asked them to prepare would be much easier to look at in a presentation format. In other words, simplified, colorized, so people can easily see what's pavement, what's the ramp, and that sort of thing. I appreciate your interest in hearing about the project, and I imagine you probably have some questions and comments, so I will open up the floor for that, please.
Thank you, Paul. Amy, do you want to provide your comment? Amy Cotto from MEA.
I don't know that I have so much comment per se. Thank you for having me, Shellfish Constable, Amy Croto, Town of Barnstable. But I did think that when my department was presented with these plans initially, that it warranted vetting through the Conservation Department and Commission prior to going to public hearing, because I just thought that you all may have questions regarding potential construction plans in both options that, again, are not on screen. But I have concerns about potential loss of accessibility, whether it be for recreational, commercial, agriculturists. And I also have concerns about, we saw how things went with the rocks for the properties just adjacent to Scudder's. So I just am not sure that these plans seem a little grandiose to me, is all.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, before you go, one question I want to check with you is, in the plan right now is some, trailer park and stuff like that. Because usually when people go there, usually it's low tide. Do you think that we need those parking space, the trailer parking space in the parking lot area?
I think that in the lower lot, designated as trailer spaces with trucks would be good. And I'm not sure that the pull-off would be necessary. I think that will come at a loss to recreational parking, which even off tide, it's a popular spot for people to go, including fishing off tide, which doesn't require it to be low tide. It's a very busy area that's utilized by a lot of different groups. And I do think also that the widening of the road and increased accessibility could, in fact, have a negative impact on the people who live on the road, as they've had a lot of opinions about what happens at that landing as well, regardless of whether or not they use it. So it's a very tight area that's very heavily utilized by a number of different people. And I'm just glad that you all are looking at this ahead of it going to public hearing.
I am one of the persons that keep driving to the parking lot when we have a low tide. I go there every week when we do the oystering stuff. And I also seen a lot of residents taking their dogs walk all the way down, with the traffic. So we have to be careful in terms of, the interaction between the residents in that area and the people that go in there for shellfishings. Any questions from the commissioner, Pete?
Yes, thank you. Well, you just all should know that I probably go there about 40 times a year. I fish it probably twice a summer or twice a week all summer long. And then like Tom, I shellfish an awful lot. And I've been doing it for about 22 years. So I'm hugely familiar with this launch. A couple of things, Paul, that I completely agree with. Drainage, we got to fix the drainage. The revetment and guardrail got to be fixed. If you're going to do any work down there, I'm fairly certain we got to have ADA space and access. Completely agree with that. A couple of things that I'm going to agree with the general population, less is better. Frankly, I would be devastated if this got industrialized to a 2-width launching ramp area. I have a very small and light boat. It's a 16-foot aluminum boat. I am the only time you can launch a boat bigger than what I have with any kind of draft at all. So I got like 8 inches of draft tops, is when you have a high tide, because the run out into Barnstable Harbor, once you leave the tarmac launch area, is very, very flat. So large boats can't use that area unless, of course, you've got some of the oyster folks that have got these very shallow draft boats and they run them out along that flats and then they can launch them. But the need for the pervious pavers that you have below the tarmac, I agree that tarmac needs to be fixed. And the grading that you have on the sides of the tarmac with the stone is going to make it a lot safer. Completely agree with that. The existing sediment that is there does get packed. I don't think you need the pavers. There is on the figure, let's see, boy, let me get my glasses on here. It's the draft that shows the option 1 and option 2. On the option 1, which is the only one I could even that I could support, again, the one launch boat ramp, you have on the very top edge of that, you have relocate existing boulders along the property line. That's what's written there in very fine print. And it is well seaward of the high tide mark. And I'm asking why? Why do we disrupt any of the boulders except in the very place where we are working on the construction of the ramp, the actual ramp itself? So that I don't see, fix the ramp. I like the guardrail, work with the runoff. One other question I have for you, please, Paul. I drive down there, as I said, I launch my boat regularly because it's such a light and small boat. I have a 15-foot Isuzu, and then I've got a 16-foot boat. My trailer is from my tailgate out to the end of my motor, tops 18 to 20 feet. So that gives me about a 35-foot boat and trailer. You have on your essentially figuring here an estimation for a turnaround area using a boat and trailer of 42 feet length total. And that gives you then the need for a fairly wide turning radius there at the bottom. As I think Amy said or Tom said, I don't think you need it. You can't launch a big boat there ever, except at the very highest of tides. And allowing parking spaces to be facing that bulkhead and guardrail allows people with limited access to sit there. My papa did it with my mom when he couldn't even get out of the car anymore. But they would go down there. Sorry.
Did we lost you, Pete?
No, I'm.
Oh, sorry.
Take a minute, Pete. Take a minute.
Yeah.
You want to go to Larry, Pete?
Yeah.
Larry?
What a great project. Paul, first I want to congratulate you and thank you for submitting this quality of a draft for us to consider and for the neighbors and the public to have some clue as to what's going on. That is something that is not always available, and I commend you for that. The comments concerning size and the development and growth probably are the major general concerns of everybody. Here are my thoughts. First of all, this project started with the collapsing seawalls to the west of this ramp, and I presume that somewhere along the line, the project to be done at the neighboring houses will be coordinated with this as to either the work being done or the impact of the overall change. That's something that doesn't necessarily have to come before us as a unit, but that's something I'd recommend. Second, I love the upfront approach of considering many options. It doesn't mean the options have to happen, but it's valuable to discuss them. And I think that's where you are, and I hope you can stay there and get the pros and cons so that everybody can feel comfortable with the ultimate decision. Secondly, or thirdly, or fourthly, whatever, I'm not in favor of inviting people with larger trucks and larger trailers and larger boats. It doesn't mean you put a sign up there saying your car can only be this or your trailer can only be that. But the more expansive you make that area, the more you're going to tempt people to come in that may overpower or overwhelm it. I think that's something that you don't want to have happen. But the ramp, the guardrail, the manner in which some mobility at the top is essential. And the final point that I noted as Pete was talking was to stake the land in the areas and mark the stakes with some sort of code or label so that when we go out there, and this may be a rare opportunity for us to have a group site visit, we haven't done that in years, but when we go back out there, we can see where things are going to be positioned, and we will be much better informed to comment by whatever questions we may ask on site and whatever comments we may make in the hearing setting. So I hope those comments are constructive and positive, and I thank you for coming in with your very candid and general introduction to this. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Larry. Pete?
Okay, I can do this pretty quick before my dog barks. Please keep the parking spaces at the bulkhead facing out so people can go have coffee there if they really don't have any other access to the bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any other comment from the commissioner for Paul? I'm seeing none here. Paul, just like Pete said, I think the stormwater issue, I think you are aware of it, is quite important. And at the edge of the guardrail and the bulkhead there is you need to repair, and especially on the left-hand side, as you're coming down to the boat ramp, I think right now we kind of exposed in terms of you can see the pavement layer and then the sand layer. So, I think that needs to be fixed to make it properly repair stuff. So that's all I have for you. I hope this kind of informal discussion helped you. And I appreciate that you come here to give us a feedback on what your preliminary design is.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful, and we'll be back at some point after the public meeting. We'll start the permitting process, and I can't tell you what month it'll be yet, but we will be back when we're ready to submit the NOI.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Amy. Could I have the next meeting date is September the 17th. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
September 27th, Tom.
27th, Tom.
Yeah, 27th.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:46, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good night.